Today, we're cracking open something called the populist playbook to see what really makes it work. Populist. You hear that word thrown around all the time, right? But what does it actually mean? Is it a political slur or is it a badge of honor? It's got to be one of the most loaded and honestly confusing terms in politics today.
So, to get to the bottom of it, we've got to look past the screaming headlines. We need to go deeper, kind of like into the engine room of politics, to see how power actually gets built from the ground up.
Okay, so where does populism even come from? It doesn't just pop up out of nowhere. It really starts to take root when a society hits this very specific kind of breaking point. It's that moment when all the things we took for granted, our shared common sense, just stops working.
And this brings us to this big, kind of academic-sounding word, hegemony. But don't worry, it's not that complicated. It's basically all the unspoken, common-sense ideas that hold a society together. Think of it like the default setting, you know? The invisible rules of the game that we all just accept, usually without even thinking twice about it.
So what happens when that common sense suddenly doesn't make sense anymore? When the system just isn't delivering on its promises? The Italian thinker Antonio Gramsci, he really nailed this. He said a crisis is that exact moment when the old is dying and the new cannot be born. And that leaves this huge vacuum, a time of real uncertainty, and for a lot of people, a lot of anxiety.
And it's that vacuum, that exact opening, where populism comes in. See, it's not really an ideology in the way we think of, say, socialism or conservatism. It's much more of a strategic playbook, a method for building power when everything feels like it's up for grabs. And this playbook, it really boils down to two key moves. Step 1, create a really powerful, unifying symbol. And step 2, link together a whole bunch of different, seemingly disconnected problems and grievances into one big chain.
Let's talk about that first move. It's all about creating something called an empty signifier. Just think about words like the people, or change, or justice. They're intentionally broad, right? They're sort of emptied of any one specific meaning. And that's the whole point. It's totally strategic because it allows all these different groups to project their own unique hopes and their own frustrations onto that single word. It becomes this huge banner that almost anyone can rally behind. And that leads us to the second, absolutely crucial play. This one involves totally flipping the script on how politics usually works. So normally, politics runs on what you could call a logic of difference. Society's complex, right? You've got your issue, I've got mine, and we all kind of fight for our own corner. But populism, it uses a logic of equivalence. It takes all those separate, frustrated demands, links them all together, and then, and this is the key part, it radically simplifies the entire political world into just two camps, a clear us and a clear them.
Okay, so that's the theory, but let's see what this playbook looks like when it hits the streets, in the real world.
And trust me, this is not just some abstract idea from a dusty old book. You can see this exact playbook in action all over the place across the entire political spectrum.
Remember the Occupy Wall Street movement? I mean, their main slogan, all our grievances are connected, that is the logic of equivalence, like in its absolute purest form. It was a way of taking the student drowning in debt, the factory worker who just got laid off, the family facing foreclosure, and telling them, hey, your problems aren't separate issues. They're all connected. They all come from the same place.
And how did they make that connection so powerful? Simple. They drew a hard line in the sand, an antagonistic line. Suddenly, us was the 99%, and them the 1%. It's a brilliant, incredibly powerful way to simplify a very, very complex economic situation.
And it's not just Occupy. We saw the exact same playbook in Greece with the rise of the Syriza Party. When the debt crisis hit, they framed it as a crystal clear us versus them. Us was the people, suffering under crushing austerity, and them, that was the establishment, both in Greece and across Europe. And by channeling all of that social anger, they managed to turn it into actual political power.
In the results, they were absolutely stunning. Just look at this. Syriza went from being this tiny, marginal party with under 5% of the vote in 2009 to winning the whole election with over 36% just 6 years later. That is the power of this playbook when a crisis hits.
But here's the thing. This isn't a game that just ends when one side wins an election. The rise of populism sets off this constant push and pull, a real tug-of-war right at the very heart of politics.
What's really fascinating is that the populists and the anti-populist forces, they kind of need each other. They define themselves by what they're not. So populism gets all its energy from fighting the establishment. And at the same time, the establishment shores up its own identity by painting itself as the sane, responsible alternative to the dangerous populist. In a weird way, they can't exist without each other.
And this whole split-screen view of the world, it's nothing new. There's this old anthropological study where they asked members of the Winnebago tribe to just draw a map of their village. And they got back two totally different kinds of pictures. One group drew it as these unified, concentric circles, but the other group, they drew it as two halves split right down the middle by a line. It just goes to show you that these two competing visions, seeing society as one whole or seeing it as fundamentally divided, it's a basic pattern in how we humans think about our communities.
Okay, so we've gone through all of this theory, all these examples, but why does any of it actually matter? Why should you care about understanding this playbook?
All right, let's recap the key takeaways here. Number 1, populism isn't really about being left-wing or right-wing. It's a method, a way of building power. 2, it pops up when a society's common sense, its hegemony, is in crisis. 3, its main trick is to unite a ton of different grievances into one big chain against a common enemy. And 4, the end result is always this powerful, super simplified, us versus them picture of the world.
Once you get this framework, it's like getting a new pair of glasses. It helps you see politics not just as a fight over ideas or policies, but as something deeper, a constant, ongoing struggle over who even gets to be called the people.
Because when you boil it all down, that's what's really at stake. All of politics is this constant battle to define who the people are, and by extension, who they aren't. And so the question it really leaves us with is a big one. Who gets to draw that line?